I want to talk about the accidental public servant. There are people who have been accidental public servants. There are people who, due to some circumstances, found themselves in leadership positions. These are individuals who desire leadership, and some of them have occupied certain positions, but at that time, they did not expect their trajectory to move so fast for them to be on top. But when they found themselves on top, they took advantage of their position to do a lot of good. So history has a number of accidental public servants, people who have found themselves in a position to offer service. Let me start with President Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson was the vice president to John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963 in Texas. And so, automatically, Lyndon Johnson had to be sworn in as president. Imagine the tragedy of losing the president. The nation is in shock and in mourning when Lyndon B. Johnson took over the presidency. He was kind of an accidental president. But he did not allow that to weigh him down. He took charge. And a number of significant changes were made when Lyndon Johnson was president. For example, the Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, and other key policy decisions and legislation that gave more freedom to blacks and minorities. Lyndon Johnson was also president when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. And he led the nation in that period of mourning, and took advantage of the situation to push for more civil liberties. So here is Johnson, who came in as president after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and he took charge. To me, he was an accidental public servant who took advantage of his position to do a lot of good. Another example, this one is something I experienced. When I was in school, when I was in university, there was a vice chancellor was being picked, a new vice chancellor. So the voting was done. 3 names were sent to Abuja. And the list of the 3 names were written in order of the votes. Now, the number 1 and number 2 were said to be were favorites, where they had certain issues they were contending with. So, in Abuja, where the president usually makes the final decision on who will be the vice chancellor, the number 3 in that list was picked as vice chancellor. His name is Professor Anao. Professor Anao was the 3rd on the list, meaning that he wasn't the popular or favorite candidate to be vice chancellor. And he came from a minority part of the state. But in spite of how he came in, Professor Anao took charge. I witnessed a number of vice chancellors when I was in school, and I can tell you that from my experience, Professor Anao was the best. He was an accidental vice chancellor. He wasn't meant to be vice chancellor at that time. But when he became Vice Chancellor, he made a number of significant changes. One of which was he brought this public-private partnership, where before in the hostels were being cleaned by civil servants, employees of the university. It's a federal university, so employee of the federal government. And they were doing a terrible job because civil service, irrespective of how you do your work, you still collect your salary. They were doing a terrible job. Professor Anao, as Vice Chancellor, brought in contract cleaners. He gave the contract of cleaning to a private company. The private company will now employ staff to clean the hostels. And they did a fantastic job. If you see the condition of the toilets and the hostel when those contract guys came in, it was fantastic. That change was brought by Professor Anao. And one other policy he brought was, because of the issue of courtesan, there were a lot of court-related attacks. He now enforced the ban on commercial motorcycles in the whole campus. And commercial motorcycles was very popular because that's the main means by which students go around the campus. But he enforced it. Initially, the student bodies were against it. And I was against it. But later, I saw the wisdom in it. Because those commercial motorcycles were constituting nuisance in the school. Carrying people, making a lot of noise. But when he enforced the ban on commercial motorcycle, he encouraged commercial vehicles, transport vehicles, very small vehicles, to be carrying students around the school. They will be at the main gate, they will be at Ekosodin gate, at the major gates and entrances into the school. You see them. So students have to take these small vehicles to shuttle around the campus because there was no commercial motorcycles, and it helped because the vehicles cannot get everywhere, so students have to walk some distance to get those vehicles, and the noise pollution reduced. Another significant achievement he made was reducing courtesan. He actually dealt with courtesan because at that time courtesan was a major problem. And what he did, he brought an amnesty program, for repentant courtists to, repent and change their ways. But for that amnesty to work, they really went after the court leaders and the court guys and made sure that, those who were in charge were dealt with. And he brought in the amnesty program and a lot of repentant courtists. There was even a public event that was done. And a number of other significant changes that he did. He was opposed to the student union. At that time, we had some very vibrant, Luther Continua student leaders. He was against it. But at the end of the day, overall, you see that he that was not supposed to be Vice Chancellor made a fantastic Vice Chancellor. And I always remember that. Another person that we can say is an accidental public servant is Goodluck Jonathan. Goodluck Jonathan contested to be governor in Bayelsa State, and he was not expected to win. But Alame Shega picked him. Alame Shega, who was the leading candidate, picked Goodluck Jonathan, who was from another part of the state, to be his running mate, to be the deputy governor. And they won, and they went into power. So unfortunately, Alame Shega, was in trouble with the law, and he had to leave. And so Goodluck Jonathan became the governor of Bayelsa State. And when President Obasanjo finished his term and he was looking for those who would be his successors, he already picked Yaradua from Katsina State, the governor of Katsina State, to be his successor. And he picked Goodluck Jonathan to be his running mate. So Yar'Adua won as president. Goodluck Jonathan became deputy vice president. Unfortunately, Yar'Adua was a very fantastic president. Even with his health challenge, he did a lot. One major thing he did was the amnesty program in Niger Delta, and he did very well with that program, But unfortunately, he had health issues, and unfortunately, he couldn't complete his term. He died in office, and Goodluck Jonathan became president. He became president, just like Lyndon Johnson, but in this case, the president died from ill health, not an assassination attack,